this was probably the second or third most popular question that you guys asked today, which was, should I buy in a limited company or in my personal name? And again, it's a tax-driven question. So again, the strict answer is you've got to speak to a tax accountant. If you haven't, again, just as a reminder, just put into the chat intro to tax accountant, and we'll get you hooked up with our property tax accountants if you don't have one yourself, and they'll be able to answer that limited company versus personal. However, we do have a view you might not be surprised to see. So limited companies, with the tax changes, particularly going back to 2016, there was a very draconian change in the tax laws that really fueled the setting up of SPVs, limited companies, for buying properties in. And if we fast forward to 2026, they now dominate the buy-to-let mortgage market. The stats are that 6 out of every 10 purchases, certainly last year in 2025, 6 out of 10 purchases were done in a limited company. And that's likely to continue as we go into 2026, 27. So it's clearly there's a reason behind it, where now more landlords are going to limited companies than buying in personal names. And it tends to be tax driven. And there's two elements here. One is that usually our landlords are in the buying properties, aren't they? That you're in growth phase, as I would call it. So you're adding to your portfolio. So what I tend to see as a broker is that landlords have maybe another source of income. Maybe they're employed, maybe they've got another business where their earned income's coming from to pay the bills. And the property portfolio is for the future. They're building up that income, that passive income, but it's not there yet. So therefore, they're not relying on that income now to put food on the table. So if that's the case, then if you've got your properties in a limited company, it's a tax efficient vehicle because you've only got corporation tax to think about. If you're not pulling that surplus, that profit from rent out of the limited company, you don't have the double tax scenario of corporation tax plus personal tax. Because what you can do is any surplus from rents stays in the limited company. Yes, you pay corporation tax on it, but then you can recycle that as your deposit for your next purchase. So it stays within that bubble within the limited company, but for those purposes. The other advantage that we see landlords buying limited company for is for legacy and succession planning. So unlike in a personal name where once you are you've left this mortal coil, then your inheritors are essentially acquiring the property, and that will trigger some tax implications. Whereas if you can manage the succession planning and start to bring your beneficiaries on in a planned way with your accountants on board, they can come on as minority shareholders quite often. If you speak to us at the same time, we can tell you where those minority shareholders will stay under the radar, not have to be brought in, or it won't prohibit you or inhibit you getting mortgages, but there'll be a tipping point, usually over 20% shareholding, where those minority shareholders might have to go into the mortgages. But then if they're of a certain age, and we know that it won't then impact on mortgages, you can start to bring those beneficiaries on as not only minority shareholders, but start to increase their shareholding in a planned way to minimize tax, and ultimately the transfer of those assets move across from maybe one generation to another. As I said, it is a tax question, but that's my sort of view on that one.